AITA for inviting my wife's ex and sister to dinner after realizing we'd been lied to. I'm William, 41, and until all of this happened, I would have described my marriage as steady in that boring, mostly good way people stop appreciating until something cracks. Claire is 39. We'd been together for 14 years and married for 11. We weren't one of those couples who posted anniversary tributes every year or called each other best friends every 5 minutes. We had routines. We knew how the other took their coffee. We could tell from the way one of us closed a cabinet whether it had been a rough day. We argued about plans, forgot to answer texts, got annoyed over chores, made up, and moved on. It felt ordinary enough that I thought ordinary meant secure. I also took some pride in not being a jealous husband. That matters because Adrian had existed in the background of our relationship almost from the beginning. Claire had dated him years before she met me, back when they were both in their early 20s. She'd told me about him without being asked. It wasn't a confession. He was just part of her history. Every so often, his name came up in a story about a concert, a road trip, a terrible apartment one of them had lived in, or some restaurant they used to like. As far as I knew, the relationship had ended because they wanted different things. Claire wanted more stability. Adrian didn't know what he wanted. They broke up, drifted apart, and eventually stopped talking. I met him once years later at a gathering through mutual friends. We shook hands, made small talk, and that was it. There was no weird macho moment. He didn't stare at Claire across the room. She didn't act strange around him. I remember leaving that night thinking it was almost funny that people make such a big deal out of meeting an ex. So when Claire came home about 6 months before that message and said she'd run into Adrian, I noticed, but I didn't treat it like an emergency. We were in the kitchen. She was putting groceries away and said, almost casually, "Guess who I saw today?" I guessed 2 people from her past. Both were wrong. "The Adrian," she said. I looked at her. "The Adrian?" She laughed. "Oh, please. Ancient history. How is he?" "Fine. Older. That tends to happen." She gave me a look and tossed a bag of coffee onto the counter. They'd apparently talked for 20 minutes. He'd moved back to the area a while earlier. He'd never married. They exchanged numbers because, in Claire's words, it would have been weirder not to after talking that long. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I also didn't think being uncomfortable gave me authority over her phone. So I told her that. "I'm not going to tell you who you can talk to," I said. "But if this gets emotionally weird, tell me before I have to notice it myself." She stopped what she was doing and looked at me. "It won't." "Okay." "And if it did, I'd tell you. That's all I'm asking." She came over, kissed my cheek, and said, "We're adults. An ex doesn't have to be a crisis." At the time, I agreed with her. The part one didn't understand yet was that Claire had a lifelong habit of treating information like something that could be portioned out according to what would keep everyone calm. Usually, it was a useful quality. If her parents were arguing, Claire could talk to each of them separately and somehow get both people to show up for dinner without reigniting the fight. If Jenna was upset, Claire would translate what Jenna really meant before anyone had a chance to take offense. If I got irritated at some family plan changing at the last minute, Claire could explain why it had happened in a way that made it seem less inconsiderate. I used to call her the diplomat. She'd say, "Most people don't need the whole argument. They just need the part that helps them move forward." I didn't think much about that sentence until later. To be fair to Claire, our marriage wasn't perfect when Adrian came back into her life. Several months before that, we'd started going through what I thought of as a quiet rough patch. Nothing dramatic had happened. There was no single fight I could point to. We were just less deliberate about each other. We'd make plans for dinner, and then one of us would be tired. We'd sit in the same room looking at separate screens. We'd say we should go somewhere for a weekend and never pick a date. We had a recurring conversation about needing to spend more quality time together, but we kept having the conversation instead of ever acting on it. I thought that was a normal marital slump. Claire, I later learned, had started telling Adrian that it was proof our marriage was essentially ending. Those are not the same thing. In the first month after they reconnected, she was open about him. Adrian sent me a picture of that awful diner we used to go to. Adrian remembers that band you hated. Adrian says the neighborhood where he used to live is completely different now. His name came up enough that I noticed it, but not enough that I felt alarmed. Then, gradually, he stopped being Adrian. He became an old friend. One Saturday she said, I'm grabbing coffee with an old friend. I was looking for my keys and asked, who? She paused just long enough for me to notice. Adrian. Okay. She stared at me. See, this is what I mean. What do you mean? That tone. What tone? Like I'm asking permission. I wasn't trying to start a fight, so I said, you're not. She relaxed almost immediately. That became part of the pattern. Any question that landed wrong turned into a conversation about whether I trusted her, and because I wanted the answer to be yes, I often dropped the original question. Around the third month, Claire started having more evenings where she supposedly needed to be with Jenna. Jenna is 35 and had always been close to Claire. I had known her for more than a decade. We weren't best friends separately from Claire, but I thought of her as family. If Claire said Jenna was having a rough time and wanted to talk, that wasn't something I was going to interrogate. The first time, Claire texted that she was going to be late because Jenna was stressed and needed company. I told her no problem. The second time, we had planned to watch a movie at home. Claire came into the room with her phone in her hand and said, Jenna's having family stuff. I should probably go over there. Family stuff involving a family you're also part of? Not funny. Is she okay? She will be. She left around 7 and came home after 10. What struck me wasn't that she was late. It was that she was in an unusually good mood when she got back. She walked in with that lighter energy people have after a fun night out, not after spending 3 hours talking a sibling through a crisis. She took off her shoes, poured herself water, and leaned against the counter. Then she said, Do you think two people can meet at the wrong time in life? I looked over from the couch. What? Like, timing matters, right? You could meet someone when neither of you is ready for what the other person wants. Sure. And then years later, maybe you're different people. I watched her for a second. Why are you asking me this after helping Jenna with family stuff? Claire smiled in a way that was almost dismissive. It was on a podcast. What podcast? I don't know. One Jenna had on. I accepted that answer because accepting it was easier than deciding I was suspicious of my wife based on a hypothetical question. That sounds ridiculous to me now. At the time, it felt like maturity. A couple of weeks later, we had lunch with Jenna and Claire's parents. Nothing dramatic happened. That's important. There was no movie scene slip where Jenna announced she hadn't seen Claire in months. We were sitting around the table after eating, and I said to Jenna, By the way, thanks for putting up with Claire so much lately. I feel like you've had her on call. Jenna looked at me. There was maybe a 1-second pause. Yeah, she said. Sure. Claire immediately asked her dad about something unrelated. I noticed, but I didn't know what I had noticed. Later, in the car, I asked Claire, Is Jenna okay? Why? She seemed weird when I mentioned you spending time with her. Claire's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Can you not analyze her? I'm not analyzing her. She's dealing with private things. She doesn't want everyone discussing them. I'm not everyone. William. That was it. Just my name, in the tone that meant I was crossing a line. I backed off. There were other small things. Once, her phone lit up while it was on the kitchen counter. She turned it face down without checking it. That wasn't proof of anything. People turned phones over. Another time she stepped into the hallway to take a call and came back 5 minutes later saying it was someone I know. I asked Adrian. She said, Why does it matter? Because if it was him, you can just say it was him. She exhaled hard. Yes, it was Adrian. I didn't say anything else. A week later, I finally asked the question directly. We were getting ready for bed. Claire was at the bathroom sink washing her face. I was standing in the doorway. Has this become more than a friendship for you? She looked at me in the mirror. What has? Adrian. She turned off the water. We talk sometimes. That's not what I asked. What are you asking? I'm asking whether there's something emotional happening that you haven't told me. Claire stared at me for several seconds, then dried her face and said, Do you understand how impossible this is? What is? If I mention him, you're uncomfortable. If I don't mention him every time we talk, I'm hiding him. If I see him, it becomes evidence. If I don't see him but text him, that's evidence too. What exactly am I supposed to do that passes this test? I didn't say you're cheating. You don't have to. I'm asking you a question. And I'm answering. We're friends. We talk. Yes, we have history. That doesn't mean I'm trying to restart my life with him. There was enough truth in that answer that I lost confidence in my own question. I had been uncomfortable. I had noticed his name. I had noticed when she stopped using his name. Maybe I had created a situation where anything she did would look suspicious to me. Claire sat on the edge of the bed and rubbed her forehead. I thought we were mature enough for an old boyfriend to exist without this becoming a crisis. There it was again. I sat down beside her. I'm sorry if I'm making you feel monitored. Thank you. If something changes, I still need you to tell me. It hasn't. I let it go. For the next few weeks, things got better in the most confusing way possible. Claire started doing small, thoughtful things again. She'd bring me coffee without asking. She picked up something I needed while she was out. She texted me during the day about ordinary stuff. One night, she put her hand on my shoulder as she passed behind me and left it there for a second longer than necessary. I took those things as evidence that I'd overreacted. Emotionally, though, she still felt somewhere else. We weren't fighting. We also weren't really talking. Then one night, completely out of nowhere, she asked, "Do you think a marriage can be over before either person actually says the words?" We were in the living room. I had been half watching television. I muted it. "Are you talking about us?" "No." "Then what are you talking about?" "I don't know. Just in general." "That's a pretty specific general question." She looked annoyed. "Forget I asked." "No. If you think our marriage is over, I need you to say that." "I didn't say that." "I'm saying if you ever believe it, tell me. Don't make me guess." Her expression softened. "I know." That conversation bothered me more than I admitted. But again, I talked myself down. People have abstract thoughts. Married people question things. We were in a rough patch. Not every uncomfortable sentence is a confession. Then Adrian messaged me. I still don't know why Claire gave him my number. He later said she had sent it because she was arranging the dinner and wanted everyone to be able to coordinate if plans changed. That would have been normal if I had known there was a dinner. His first message was so polite that my brain kept trying to turn it into something harmless. Claire said you're fine with me coming over tomorrow. Still good for around 7. Maybe she had forgotten to mention it. Maybe it was last minute. Maybe she planned to tell me that night. Then came, "I'm glad she finally told you everything." Everything is not a word you use for coffee with an old friend. When he said he didn't want to step into something Claire and I hadn't settled, I felt something in me change. Not explode. Not break. Just go very still. I called Jenna. She answered on the 4th ring. "Hey, everything okay? Can I ask you something weird?" That's never a good opening. "Was Claire with you last Thursday night?" Silence. "Why?" Just answer first. "I don't think so." "You don't think so?" "I was home. She wasn't here." "What about the Friday 2 weeks before that? She said you were dealing with something with your parents." Jenna was quiet again. "No, I had dinner with them that night, but Claire wasn't there." I sat down at the kitchen table. "Has Claire ever asked you to cover for her?" "What? No." "Has she ever said anything like, if I ask, don't get into details?" Another pause. "Sort of." "What does sort of mean?" "She texted me once saying she had some family stuff and if you asked questions, not to get into it, because she didn't want everybody discussing mom and dad." "When was that?" "I don't know. A month ago? Maybe more." "Did she say she was with you?" "No." "Did she say it was about your parents?" "Not exactly. I assumed." I closed my eyes. That was Claire's skill in one small example. She had not technically told Jenna to lie. She had not technically told Jenna what lie needed protection. She had just put a fence around the subject and let Jenna believe the fence was protecting something else. Meanwhile, Claire had told me she was physically with Jenna. "William," Jenna said, "what is going on? I think Claire has been using your name when she isn't with you." "Using my name for what?" "I don't know all of it yet." "What do you mean you don't know?" "I mean Adrian is coming to dinner tomorrow." She went completely silent. "Adrian as in Adrian?" "Yes." "Why?" "He thinks Claire already told me everything about something." "Oh my God." "I want you to come." "No." "Jenna." "No, absolutely not. Whatever this is, it's between you and Claire." "I thought that too until 10 minutes ago. I don't want to be in the middle of your marriage. I think you're already in it. I just don't think you knew." That was the line that changed her mind. She still hated the idea. I could hear it in her voice. What time? 7. I am not staying if this turns into screaming. Fair. After we hung up, I sat at the table for a long time. I could have confronted Claire then. That is the part people later focused on, and they weren't wrong. I had enough information. I knew Claire had lied about being with Jenna. I knew Adrian believed I understood some larger situation. I knew a dinner had been arranged behind my back. I could have waited for Claire to come home and asked, "What did you tell Adrian about our marriage?" Instead, I decided I wanted all of us in the same room. At the time, I told myself it was because Claire had already shown me how she handled separate conversations. She'd tell me one thing, tell Jenna something vague, tell Adrian something else, then spend the next day smoothing the edges until no one had enough certainty to accuse her of lying. I didn't want that. I wanted one conversation that couldn't be revised between rooms. That was true. It was also true that I was angry, and part of me wanted her to feel what I had been feeling, trapped inside a story someone else had arranged. I didn't fully admit that to myself until later. The next day was strange because Claire acted almost normal. She went about her morning. She answered a couple of emails. She asked if we needed groceries. She didn't mention Adrian. Around 3 in the afternoon, she finally said, "By the way, Adrian might stop by tonight." I was standing at the kitchen counter. Might. Probably. For what? She leaned against the counter across from me. "I think maybe it would be good if everybody just met. You've been uncomfortable with him. He knows you're uncomfortable. It's getting stupid. What are we supposed to be clearing up?" "Nothing, exactly. That's the point." I looked at her. She kept going. "We're adults. An ex doesn't have to be a crisis. Maybe if you actually talk to him, you'll see there's nothing dramatic happening." "Okay." That was all I said. Claire visibly relaxed. I noticed it. She thought she'd pulled the evening into place. About an hour later, she ordered takeout from a place we both liked because, as she said, "I don't want this to feel formal." I almost laughed at that, but didn't. Jenna arrived at 6:40. Claire opened the door. The expression on her face wasn't guilt exactly. It was alarm at a variable she hadn't accounted for. "What are you doing here?" Jenna looked past her at me. "William invited me." Claire turned toward me. "Why?" I said, "You've been talking about how much you've had going on with Jenna lately. I thought she might as well join us. Can I talk to you?" She didn't wait for an answer. She walked into the kitchen, and I followed. She kept her voice low. "What are you doing?" "Having dinner." "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Act like this is normal." I almost said that nothing about the night was normal, but I didn't want to start before Adrian arrived. Claire glanced toward the other room, where Jenna was taking off her jacket. "Why is she here?" "I invited her." "You said that. And that's the answer." Claire stared at me. "Please don't turn tonight into an interrogation." Then there shouldn't be much to interrogate. I regret that line a little. Not because it was false, but because I knew exactly what I was doing by then. Claire went very still. Before she could answer, the doorbell rang. Adrian looked nothing like the man I'd built in my head during the previous 24 hours. I had expected someone confident, maybe smug. Someone walking into my house feeling like he had won something. Instead, he looked uncomfortable. He had both hands in his jacket pockets. He greeted Claire with a quick nod, not a hug. When I opened the door wider, he said, "Thanks for having me." Then he saw Jenna behind me. "Oh," he said. Claire jumped in. Jenna ended up joining us. I almost corrected her. I didn't. Adrian looked at me. "Is that okay?" The question caught me off guard. "Yes." He nodded. That was the first moment I understood that Adrian thought I was part of whatever arrangement Claire had created. We sat down with cartons of takeout spread across the table. Nobody had bothered with serving dishes. For the first 10 minutes, the conversation was painfully ordinary. Adrian asked Jenna about something he vaguely remembered from years ago. Jenna answered in short sentences. Claire talked too much. I mostly listened. Adrian kept checking my face before he answered anything about Claire. Not dramatically, just small glances. Claire filled every pause. At one point she said, "See, this is exactly why I thought it would be better to just do this instead of letting everything feel strange." Adrian said, Right. But he didn't sound convinced. I finally put my fork down. Adrian, how long have you thought Claire and I were separated? Claire said my name immediately. William. Adrian froze. Jenna looked between us. I kept my eyes on Adrian. He said, I'm sorry. How long have you believed Claire and I were separated? Claire spoke again, faster. That is not what I told him. Adrian looked at her. Claire. She shook her head. I said we were having serious problems. No, he said. You said you two had agreed the marriage was basically done. Jenna's face changed. Claire's voice got sharper. I said emotionally we were in a very bad place. Adrian looked at me again. She said you knew. I didn't. The table became very quiet, but not in some dramatic movie way. Jenna shifted in her chair. Somebody's phone buzzed once and nobody reached for it. Claire looked at me. So this is what this is. What is this? You knew something before tonight. I knew Adrian thought I knew something. You could have asked me. I have asked you. Not about this. Because I didn't know there was a this. Adrian sat back. Can somebody tell me what's going on? Claire turned toward him. William is angry because I've been talking to you, and he's decided to make this into something. I looked at Jenna. How many times has Claire actually been with you in the last 2 months when she said she was helping you? Jenna frowned. Wait. Claire said, don't bring her into this. Jenna looked at her. Apparently I'm already in it. Claire's mouth tightened. I named the 2 nights I'd asked Jenna about on the phone. Jenna said, you weren't with me either time. Claire answered immediately. I never told you to lie. Jenna stared at her. I didn't say you did. Then why are you making it sound like I did? Because William thought you were with me. Claire turned to me. I said I was dealing with family stuff. No. You said you were going to Jenna's. More than once. Maybe once. More than once. She shook her head. This is insane. You're keeping score now. Jenna interrupted. Claire, did you use me as an excuse? I did not ask you to cover for me. That's not what I asked. Claire looked away. Jenna's voice got quieter. You texted me not to get into details if William asked about family stuff. Because Mom and Dad were having issues. Were they? At the time, yes. Did that have anything to do with where you were? Claire didn't answer. Jenna sat back, processing. Then she said, you made me your answer to questions I didn't even know he was asking. Claire rubbed her forehead. I did not plan this the way you're all making it sound. Adrian let out a breath. Then what exactly did you plan? She turned on him. Don't. No. I want to know too. Claire stared at him like his willingness to question her was a betrayal all by itself. I said, tell me what you thought our situation was. Adrian looked deeply uncomfortable. I'm not trying to pile on. Just tell me. He nodded slowly. Claire told me you two had been struggling for a long time. True. She said you talked about separating. We have never talked about separating. Claire interrupted. We talked about whether this was working. When? William, come on. No. When? She looked down at the table. We've had conversations about being disconnected. That's not the same as agreeing to separate. Adrian said quietly. She told me you had. Claire looked at him. I said we were effectively there. You said he knew. I said he understood how serious it was. No, Adrian said. You said he knew the marriage was ending and that you were keeping it private while you figured out what to do next. That sentence did more damage to me than learning she had lied about 2 evenings. Because it was specific. Not, we're unhappy. Not, things are complicated. She had given another person a status update on my marriage that I had never received. I looked at Claire. When did I agree my marriage was over? She didn't answer cleanly. We weren't okay. That's not what I asked. I know what you asked. Then answer it. She looked at me, angry now. You want me to name a date? Fine. I can't name a date. There wasn't one conversation where we signed a contract. But you knew we weren't okay. I knew we were in a rough patch. That's your interpretation. It's my marriage. It's mine too. Then why was Adrian getting a different version of it? Claire pushed her chair back slightly. Because I could talk to him. That landed. She realized it had landed and tried to correct it. I mean, he had distance from it. He wasn't in the middle of our routines. He could hear me without immediately treating everything like a problem to solve. I said, "How often were you seeing each other?" Claire said, "Not that often." Adrian answered at nearly the same time. "We had coffee a bunch of times." Claire turned toward him. "That's not helpful." He gave her a look I had never seen from him before. "I'm trying to be accurate." I said, "Dinner?" Adrian hesitated. "Twice." I looked at Claire. She said, "It wasn't a date." Adrian rubbed one hand over his jaw. "We talked about our past. People can talk about the past. You told me you were trying to figure out whether we still had something." Claire stared at him. "That's not fair." "What's not fair about repeating what you said?" "Because you're making it sound like I had a plan." "I thought you did." She looked away. That was when I understood Adrian wasn't there expecting to steal my wife in front of me. He had come expecting confirmation. He thought Claire had already ended one part of her life and was slowly making it official. He also wasn't innocent. He had accepted that story because it allowed him to keep seeing a married woman he still had feelings for. I knew that even while I was realizing he had been lied to too. I asked the question I had been avoiding. "Did anything physical happen?" Claire said, "Not the way you're making it sound." I remember that exact wording because it made me stop breathing for a second. I looked at Adrian. He closed his eyes briefly. "She kissed me." Claire snapped. "It was one kiss." I didn't say anything. Adrian kept going, not looking at her. "It was a few weeks ago. We had been talking for a long time. She kissed me." I pulled away. Claire laughed once, bitterly. "That's convenient." "It's what happened." "You didn't exactly act disgusted." I didn't say I was disgusted. That answer was honest enough to make the whole thing worse. He looked at me. "I still have feelings for her." I told her that. I'm not pretending I don't. But after she kissed me, I told her I wasn't doing this if you didn't know the marriage was ending. I turned to Claire. She said nothing. Adrian continued. "She told me you knew." I said, "She told you that after the kiss?" "Yes." "What exactly did she say?" Claire cut in. "Do we really need exact wording now?" "Yes." Adrian looked miserable. "She said you'd already accepted it. That you were hurt, obviously, but that you knew you two were basically done and you were trying to handle it privately." I looked at Claire. She said, "That is not exactly what I said." Adrian's voice got harder. "It's exactly what you wanted me to believe." Claire stood up. "This was a mistake." "No," I said. "Sit down." She looked at me. "I'm not your child." "Then leave if you want. But don't stand up and pretend the conversation is the problem." She sat again, but only because I think she knew leaving would answer too much. I asked, "Why did you arrange this dinner?" Claire looked from me to Adrian. "Because everything had gotten weird." "That's not an answer." "It is an answer." Adrian said, "You said you wanted us to talk because William knew everything now." Claire shook her head. "I said I wanted things out in the open. You told me he knew." "I told you he understood." "You keep changing the verb." That was one of the few times Adrian sounded angry. I realized then what the plan had probably been. Claire had intended to bring Adrian into our house as an old friend. She had intended to let me be polite because I thought he was an old friend. Adrian would see me being polite and assume that politeness meant I had accepted whatever Claire had told him. My ignorance was supposed to act like consent. I said that out loud, though not as neatly. You were going to have me sit here and be civil to him. And then he was supposed to think that meant I knew. Claire looked exhausted. I was trying to get everybody to the same place. No, you were trying to make it look like we were already there. I knew you would react badly if I dumped everything on you at once. What exactly is everything? She pressed her fingers to her forehead. That I have been unhappy. I knew that. Not like this. Then you should have told me. I was trying to understand it first. With him. Yes. The honesty of that answer surprised me. For the first time that night, she stopped fighting every sentence. She looked at me and said, "I didn't wake up one morning and decide to have an affair. I ran into someone who knew me before this version of my life. We started talking. I felt like myself in a way I hadn't in a long time." I didn't interrupt. She continued. "And yes, I was confused. I was scared to blow up 11 years before I knew what I was even feeling." Jenna said quietly, "So you used me." Claire turned toward her. I was trying to keep you out of it. You literally put me in it. I didn't tell you details because I didn't want you lying for me. But you let him think you were with me. Claire looked at me. I didn't know exactly what I wanted. I said, that's fine. She blinked. What? You can not know what you want. You can be confused. You can be unhappy. You can even realize you have feelings for somebody else. What you don't get to do is tell him that I've already agreed to the ending while you keep me here living in the middle. I didn't think of it like that. Of course you didn't. Thinking of it like that would have made it harder. She flinched. I almost felt guilty for the line. Then I remembered that Adrian had been told I had accepted the end of my marriage before I even knew there was a decision being made. Claire said, I needed time. I answered, you took my time too. Nobody spoke for a few seconds. Then Claire looked at me differently. Not defensive, suspicious. When did you call Jenna? I didn't answer fast enough. Her face changed. Oh my God. Jenna looked between us. Claire said, you planned this. I said, I invited her. You set this up. You set up the dinner. Not like this. No, not like this. She stood again. You could have asked me the second Adrian messaged you. Yes. That stopped her. She had expected an argument. I said yes, I could have. Adrian looked down at the table. Jenna folded her arms. Claire said, but you didn't. No, you wanted an audience. I could have defended myself immediately. I could have said Adrian and Jenna weren't an audience because they were directly involved. I could have said I needed independent accounts. I could have said she had already proven a private conversation wasn't trustworthy. All of those things were true. But her accusation was also true. Partly, I said. She stared at me. I kept going. I wanted one conversation you couldn't rewrite afterward. That is not the same thing as needing the truth. No, it's not exactly the same. You wanted me cornered. I wanted you unable to tell each person in this room something different. Same thing. Maybe partly. Jenna said, can we not make me a prop in either of your arguments? That shut both of us up. She looked at me first. I understand why you called me. I do. But I really wish you'd told me more before I walked in here. You're right. Then she looked at Claire. And I don't know what to do with the fact that you've apparently been using my name for weeks. Claire sat down again. I am sorry. Jenna shook her head. I don't want your apology right now. Adrian pushed his chair back. I think I should go. Claire looked at him. Of course. He frowned. What does that mean? It means you're bailing the second this gets hard. He stared at her. This is not the situation you described. I'm standing here telling you how confused I've been, and you're walking away. I'm leaving because the situation you described doesn't exist. Claire looked like he'd slapped her, though he hadn't even raised his voice. He turned to me. I'm sorry. I said, I believe you were lied to. He nodded. I added, that doesn't mean you get to be innocent. I know. You were having emotionally intimate dinners with a married woman because you wanted her version of my marriage to be true. He swallowed. That's fair. I wasn't interested in forgiving him, and he didn't ask me to. He left. Jenna stayed another 2 minutes. She put her jacket on and told Claire she needed space. Claire said, please don't make this bigger than it is. Jenna actually laughed at that, but there was no humor in it. I don't know how big it is yet. That's kind of the problem. Then she left too. When the door closed, the house felt enormous. The takeout containers were still open on the table. Nobody had eaten much. Claire and I stood in the kitchen for a while without talking. The loudest part of the night was over. What came after was worse. She finally said, did you invite them because you'd already decided to end our marriage? No. You expect me to believe that? I invited them because I wanted to know if there was any version of this I could trust. And now, I don't know. She leaned against the counter. I kissed him once. It's not one kiss. I know you keep saying that. Because you keep answering like that's the only thing that happened. What else happened physically? That's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? I looked at her. It's the version of me you invented to make it okay. She looked down. For once, she didn't correct my wording. I asked, were you planning to leave me? I don't know. Were you planning to be with him? I don't know. Were you planning to tell me before you decided? She started crying then. Not dramatically. Her eyes filled and she looked away because she hated crying during arguments. I was trying to get there. Get where? To a point where I knew what I wanted. And while you figured that out, what was I supposed to be? She didn't answer. I slept in the guest room. The next morning, Claire asked me not to make any permanent decisions. I said I wouldn't. That wasn't mercy. I genuinely didn't know what I wanted. I was furious, but I also still knew the person I'd been married to for 11 years. That is one of the hardest parts to explain to people who want stories like this to be simple. Claire had lied to me. She had also been the person who sat with me through family losses, who knew how to make me laugh when I was in a terrible mood, who had spent thousands of ordinary days beside me without betraying me. Both things were true. For the first week, we mostly lived around each other. Claire slept in our room. I stayed in the guest room. She made coffee in the morning out of habit and still poured 2 mugs the first couple of days. On the 3rd day, she stopped. That stupid detail hurt more than some of the arguments. We talked every night, but not for hours. I had no interest in redoing the dinner. I asked specific questions. How many times had she seen Adrian? More than she had admitted, fewer than I had imagined. Had there been more than one kiss? She said no. Adrian's version was the same when I asked him one final time by text. I didn't keep talking to him after that. Had she told anyone else we were separating? She said no. Had she seriously considered leaving? Yes. Had she seriously considered staying? Also yes. The answer that bothered me most was when I asked why she had told Adrian I knew. She said, because I knew he would back away if he thought you didn't. I just stared at her. She realized what she'd admitted. So you lied because you wanted him not to back away. I lied because I wasn't ready for everything to become a decision. Those are the same sentence from my side. She didn't argue. A few days later, she asked if I would go to counseling with her. I agreed to several sessions. Not because I had decided to stay. I wanted to know whether my anger was making the decision for me. The counselor never told us who was right. I would have walked out if she had. She mostly asked questions that were annoying because they were difficult. What did Claire think would happen if she told me she was developing feelings for Adrian? Claire said she thought I would force an immediate choice. I said I probably would have asked for one. The counselor asked whether asking for a choice was the same as forcing it. Claire sat with that. Then the counselor asked me what I had wanted from the dinner besides information. That question irritated me because I already knew the answer and didn't want to say it. Finally, I said, I wanted her to lose control of the room. Claire looked at me. I continued. Not forever, not publicly, but for one conversation, yes. The counselor asked why. Because I felt like she'd been controlling every room separately. Claire said, so you punished me. I cornered you. That's punishment. Maybe it was. That was one of the more useful conversations because neither of us got to flatten what happened. Claire had deceived me for months. I had responded by engineering a confrontation. Those things were not equal. I still don't believe they were equal. But I also stopped pretending my dinner plan was morally pure just because it uncovered the truth. Outside our house, the story got messy in the normal way private problems become public enough to be uncomfortable. Claire told her parents first. I don't know exactly what she said, but her mother called me and said, I know Claire made mistakes, but bringing her sister and her ex into your home to confront her was cruel. I said, they were already involved. She said, Jenna didn't know she was involved. Neither did I. That conversation went nowhere. Her father sent me a short text saying he hoped we could work things out. I thanked him and didn't answer further. One mutual friend called me after hearing that I'd set Claire up. I asked what Claire had told him. He said that Adrian showed up for dinner. You surprised her with Jenna, and then you interrogated everybody. That's mostly true. He seemed surprised I said that. I added, did she mention why Adrian thought he was coming? Silence. No. So I told him. Not every detail. Not the kiss first. Just that Adrian had been told Claire and I were already in an agreed separation, which had never happened, and that Jenna's name had been used for nights Claire wasn't with her. He said, okay, that's obviously different. Then he paused. But I still think the setup was harsh. I know. That became a pattern. Some people thought I had every right to do it. Some thought Claire was clearly wrong, but I should have confronted her privately. A couple of people mostly avoided both of us because they didn't want to take sides. I stopped trying to control how I was seen. That was new for me. Before this, I would have softened things for Claire. I would have said, "We're just going through something." I would have protected the private version even when she was giving other people a public one. After the dinner, if somebody who had already heard Claire's version asked me directly, I corrected the facts. I didn't send screenshots. I didn't give people a timeline. I didn't campaign against her. I also stopped helping her make the story cleaner than it was. Jenna didn't speak to Claire for about 3 weeks. Then they started texting again. Their relationship didn't explode. It changed. Jenna became more cautious. I learned that later because she called me once to apologize for pulling away from me too. I told her she didn't owe me an apology. She said, "You're still tied to Claire in my head. I don't know how to separate that." I get it. We never had the same easy relationship after that. There was no dramatic falling out. We just became people who used to be family. That hurt. Adrian disappeared from the situation almost completely. He sent me one message about a week after the dinner. "I'm not seeing Claire. I don't expect you to answer. I'm sorry for my part in this." I didn't answer. Claire told me later that he had blocked her after she kept trying to explain herself. I felt no satisfaction about that. If anything, it made things harder. Because once Adrian was gone, there was a temptation to pretend the crisis had gone with him. Claire didn't have another relationship waiting for her. There was no rival to defeat. There was just our marriage and what had happened inside it. About a month after the dinner, Claire asked me a question that made that clear. If Adrian is completely out of my life, why can't we start from there? We were sitting at the kitchen table. I said, "Because Adrian isn't the only problem." "I know." "Do you?" "Yes." I lied. "You did more than lie about seeing him." "I know that too." "What do you think the problem is?" She looked tired. "That I made decisions without you." "Closer." She gave me an irritated look. "Don't quiz me." "I'm not. I'm trying to understand whether we're even talking about the same thing." She was quiet. Then she said, "I let him believe I was available before I was actually willing to become available. I waited. And I wanted you to stay stable while I figured out whether I wanted something else." That was the first time she said it that plainly. I believed her apology after that. I still do. She wasn't trying to win the argument in that moment. She wasn't changing a verb or narrowing a definition. She was admitting the shape of it. She wanted the safety of our marriage while exploring the possibility of a life with Adrian. If the possibility turned out to be real, she would move toward it. If it didn't, she wanted to avoid destroying what she already had. From inside her fear, I can understand how she got there. What I could not accept was the role she assigned me without telling me. I was supposed to stay still while she tested another future. Adrian was supposed to believe I had agreed to that. Jenna was supposed to absorb the missing hours without knowing what she was covering. And then all of us were supposed to behave according to the amount of information Claire had decided we could handle. A few weeks after that conversation, I told Claire I wanted the separation to be permanent. She didn't yell. She asked, "Even after counseling?" Counseling helped me decide. That feels backwards. Maybe. She looked at me for a long time. "Do you just not love me anymore?" That was one of the hardest questions she asked because the answer would have been easier if I didn't. "I still love you." She cried again. "Then why are you doing this?" "Because I don't know how to stay without becoming someone I don't want to be." "What does that mean?" "It means I would verify everything." She shook her head. "You wouldn't have to." "I already want to." She started to speak, but I continued. "If you tell me you're with Jenna, part of me is going to wonder if you're with Jenna. If you say someone is just a friend, I'm going to wonder what you told them about us. If you say you handled something, I'm going to wonder which version you handled. That can change. Maybe. People rebuild trust. I know. Then why not us?" I looked down at my hands. "Because I don't want the next version of our marriage to be me trying to catch you telling the truth." She didn't answer. There wasn't one final dramatic fight after that. We had practical conversations. We slept separately. We stopped making plans more than a few days ahead. Some nights we still ate at the same table. Other nights one of us waited until the other was done. Once, I heard Claire laughing at something in the other room and had the strange instinct to go see what it was. Then I remembered I was leaving. That was what the ending actually felt like. Not revenge. Not relief every day. Loss, mixed with certainty. A couple of months after the dinner, I moved into a separate place. I didn't take anything symbolic. There was no dramatic moment where I left my ring on a table. We talked about who would keep which ordinary household things and discovered that even ending a marriage involves ridiculous decisions about lamps and storage bins. Claire and I stayed civil more often than not. Sometimes she got angry all over again about the dinner. Once, during one of our last long conversations, she said, "I still can't believe you let me walk into that." I said, "I know. You could have warned me." "I know. You wanted me exposed." I thought about it. "Yes, to the people you had already involved. That doesn't make it right." "No." She seemed almost more frustrated by that answer than if I had defended myself. "So you agree it was wrong?" "I agree it wasn't clean." "What does that mean?" "It means I can admit the dinner was a trap. I just can't pretend the marriage was honest before I said it." She looked away. Neither of us had much to add after that. Months have passed now. I still think about the original conversation in the kitchen when Claire first told me she'd run into Adrian. "We're adults," she said. "An ex doesn't have to be a crisis." She was right. Adrian being an ex was never really the problem. The problem was that Claire decided what each adult was allowed to know. I also think about the other thing I told her that day. "If this gets emotionally weird, tell me before I have to notice it myself." The part that stays with me is that I did notice. I asked. And for a while, I accepted the idea that noticing was somehow the thing I needed to apologize for. I don't want to live that way again. That doesn't mean I'm going to become suspicious of everybody I date in the future. I don't want passwords. I don't want location sharing as proof of love. I don't want a relationship built around checking. What I want is simpler than that. If something changes the meaning of my relationship, I want to know before somebody else is told that I already agreed to it. I can still question whether bringing Jenna into that dinner was fair to her. I can still believe Adrian should have asked harder questions before accepting a married woman's description of a separation he had never heard from the husband himself. I can still understand why Claire was afraid to make a permanent decision before she understood what she wanted. None of that changes the one decision I no longer question. I wasn't willing to stay married in a reality that everyone else had been briefed on before me. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.